Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we have a great big bone to pick this week on this Friday Reads. So we will get into that first, and then we will do the Friday Reads portion of this thing. In an article titled Good Riddance to Literary Fiction, subtitled It Seems Silly to Have to Say It, but Readers Want Stories, from The Spectator by Sean Thomas, we get the following. So, what is this? This is an attack on literary fiction. This is the assertion literary fiction is dead. This is Much Ado About Literary Fiction. In case you hadn't noticed, the London Book Fair has been gracing our nation's capital this week, down in Earl's Court. There, the publishers, agents, and buyers of the literary globe, London is second only to Frankfurt in book fair importance, have been feverishly buying and selling the rights to hot new titles, hot new authors, maybe the odd lucky midlister, while identifying the trends, writers, and genres that conceal the ultra-precious kernel of hotness to come. A strange introductory paragraph there. In today's market, it's likely that buyers have been looking for visually rich comic books for children, enjoying a resurgence and anything in a newish genre called romantasy. Think 50 Shades of Grey meets Game of Thrones. Not all that new a genre, really, with more vampires and less spanking. Who's to say there's less spanking, and is that a good thing? But what the buyers and agents won't be looking for is literary fiction. Saying this as if that is a new idea. This is, of course, not news. The decline of literary fiction, the highbrow novels published by imprints like Picador and Granta, the look-at-me books you were keen to be seen clutching in a cafe or on the train, has long been noted. But now this esteemed literary niche has virtually disappeared. Once upon a time, literary novelists such as John Updike, Richard Ford, A.S. Byatt, Zadie Smith, J.M. Coetzee, Jonathan Franzen, Michael Ondaatje, I have never heard of this individual, and many others were viewed as the pyramidion of literature. Nowadays, such writers are published, if published at all, by little imprints who offer advances that would barely cover Tom Wolfe's dry cleaning bill. A typical pro writer in 2024 earns around £7,000, half the income of a decade before. Royalties have likewise plunged as sales have fallen off the bookshelf. What's more, when these books do come out, they are given reviews no one reads, and then they disappear unless they are fortunate enough to win a major prize, in which case they disappear. In other words, the literary novel has gone the way of poetry. Screw you, Sean Thomas. There was a time when a new poem by Tennyson would garner a splash in the Times. I am old enough to remember when a new Ian McEwan novel actually made the TV news, back when people watched TV news. Such a thing seems laughable now. It's at this point that the lament for literary fiction usually takes a judgmental edge as the observer notes the increasing imbecility of the modern reader. We're going in exactly the opposite course from my point of this discussion. Dulled by smartphones, dazzled by TikTok, and cursed with the attention span of a jittery teenage gnat on crack. But I am not of that ilk. I say good riddance to literary fiction. It was a silly, self-defeating genre in the first place, putting posh books in a posh ghetto, walling itself off from everyday readers. Short-sighted. Short-sighted, extremely short-sighted. And this is part of the problem here, is that there is no leadership in the literary community. Everyone is only out for themselves. There are no real stalwarts of the artistic genre known as literature, and the walls of the new age, a new age building of literature, have not been built. There is no outreach program for fiction in general, let alone literary fiction. There is no new process, as the writer here clearly expresses. No one watches the news anymore. No one watches the news. No one's reading the novel reviews in the local newspaper. Nobody. And the art and the criticism of the art has not particularly made the jump to new media. Now, I say this half self-indulgently, as I am trying to make these cases here. But the case that I'm making here is not for today's literature by and large. I don't do the new stuff. I don't know what the new stuff is. I don't know where the new stuff is. Continuing in the article. What makes this more poignant for me is that I once enjoyed this stuff. In my 20s and 30s, I chortled over every Martin Amis. I admired Julian Barnes. I quite liked The World According to Garp. And I struggled manfully through Toni Morrison's Beloved. Then something happened. That something was the Da Vinci Code. This book, which sold approximately 17 trillion copies, seemed to provoke an ire in the literary folk out of all proportion to its possible merits. No, it didn't. I promise you, I've read that novel. No, it didn't. That novel, from a words on the page perspective, is absolute tripe. I promise you it is. That novel makes Stephen King look like Ernest Hemingway when you're actually looking at the writing inside. It made clever people weirdly angry. I particularly remember Stephen Fry saying it was arse gravy. Could it really be that bad? One day I picked it up, the Da Vinci Code, to see for myself, and about an hour of reading, I was 150 pages in and hooked. Not because the prose, style, or dialogue, that was all quite workmanlike. No, it was sub-workmanlike. I promise you, Mr. Thomas. It was just very bad. The story is decent enough. The ideas in it, I guess, are fast enough to travel through with these ideas on your back. The characters aren't good. Anyway, but because the book had a deviously intricate plot that kept you fiercely engaged, almost against your will, it had, in short, a cracking story. And that's when I decided I'd read pretty much my last work of literary fiction. Because when I read a novel, what I really want is not a beautiful sentence, but a story. Indeed, we all want story. Why? Perhaps because human life is a story with a definite beginning, middle, and end. Perhaps because reality feels like a story. No. Okay, you want to make this point? That's fine. That's great. That's dandy. Tell me, when was the middle of your life? You don't know. You don't know that as you're living through it. You don't know when the middle of your life is. You don't remember the beginning of your life. You become sentient at some point, and that's kind of from whence these things spring. But even then, your memories of that time period are not real. I promise you that. Your mind has made up the spaces where no memory remains. Life is not in... The Da Vinci Code doesn't have a story, it has a plot. What is a story versus a plot? A plot says X, Y, and Z has to happen, so my character needs to do A, B, and C to fit in those gaps. A story says my character does A, which consequently leads to B. B leads to C, so he has to do D. That's a difference between story and plot. The Da Vinci Code is a plot-driven novel. There is someone behind these scenes pulling the strings on the characters that we have. The big bad. That's what the Da Vinci Code is. There's a difference between story and plot. You have to know this. He continues, indeed, you could argue the entire universe is brilliantly plotted thriller. It has the classic violent inciting scene, the Big Bang. It has the turbulent, compelling, and unpredictable middle. We're in an especially riotous section right now. and the end is a mystery which we desperately wish to unravel. When was the middle? You fool. Your own metaphor is just trash. I hope it's a wedding, not a funeral. Meanwhile, the author of the universe is more reclusive than J.D. Salinger. How did literary fiction come to forsake story, plot, and narrative? I'm glad you delineate between story and plot here, but I don't think you can tell the difference. You could blame modernists just as early 20th century classical composers decided to abandon melody, the narrative of music. They thereby commercially cratered their art form. So modernist 20th century writers decided to forego plot with, in the end, similarly calamitous results. That's not the problem. That is not the problem. I promise you, we're going to get to it in a moment. Now, going plotless was okay if you were mid-season James Joyce writing Ulysses, because Joyce, at his best, wrote sentences better than God. The problem is 99.99997% of writers are not named James Joyce, are not James Joyce. There are some partial and noble exceptions, writers such as Kazuo Ishiguro, Donna Tartt, Cormac McCarthy, Douglas Stewart, Shuggie Bain, who have managed to combine the joys of proper narrative with quite intellectual writing, but so many haven't. Instead, they've given us storyless literary fiction. Will it one day return the literary novel? The other day, I decided to see if things have improved by reading some recent lit fic. I chose Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. A guy's first novel? A short story writer's first novel? That's the one you went with? One that is a definitively, perhaps nothing except experimental form? Did you do that on purpose? Just to make your point? In fact, I'm beginning to doubt that you read the novel at all after making this decision. I believe that you're probably pointing to it in reference, as it is one of the most lauded novels of recent times. And what I found was a book that has a fine opening with great promise. It's true. And then it takes the inevitable plotless turn. Very true. And it becomes pointless, repetitive polyphony of discordant dead people shouting at poor old Abe. Reading it was like being trapped inside a Sir Harrison Brit Twistle opera. Don't know what that means. And I speak as someone who has been trapped inside a Sir Harrison Brit Twistle opera. Seat F row 9, Royal Opera House. However, if this all sounds depressing, it shouldn't. As the bustling London Book Fair shows, books are thriving, even if Litfic is a dead star. People still crave stories. Readers still open books with eager anticipation. There is still money, fun, and fame to be made with your mind and mere words. Just make sure, if you're a writer, that you don't mistake prettiness for purpose, obscurity for profundity, and maybe insert a dead body around page 90. Now, this is obviously false. This is obviously bad. The literary fiction versus genre fiction dichotomy itself is false. Literary fiction is a type of genre. So the old description of literary fiction is a genreless literature versus genre literature, which is science fiction, which is horror, which is romantasy, all of these things. But that is a false dichotomy. Literary fiction is the genre of the way of life. And no, I am not saying that to try to be pithy. Just think about it. The genre of daily philosophy. That's what literary fiction is. You don't read Ernest Hemingway and feel as if you have not gotten someone else's point of view. Now, I want you to do a practice with me. Imagine all science fiction, all of it, every book you find, starting from now, was spacefaring, bug-like alien shoot 'em up. Everything that's all you write. Everybody writes spacefaring, bug-like alien shoot 'em ups. Yeah, baby. Spacefarer. Bug-like alien shoot-'em-ups. That's all of science fiction. This seems to be a fairly popular subgenre. Sure, I could go for a bug shoot-'em-up. Star-traveling cockroaches taking over the entire universe until bang, bang. Johnny Blastoid has to take them out before they get to Earth. It's extermination time. That sounds cool, sure. Surely, in this genre, there would be a best of breed. Best in the business. At spacefarer, bug-like, alien shoot-'em-up. And, in that case, the author would get, 80% of the attention and money and readership? And some of the readership, some of the money, some of the attention would filter down into secondary authors of the like, of the lesser books, the lesser series, etc. But outside of that, if someone wants, space-faring cat-like alien shoot-'em-ups, they have to read something else. And if none of that is being published right now, well, tough. You got to read the older stuff. The older spacefaring cat-like alien shoot-'em-ups from the 70s. Don't you know? So, that being the case, those secondary authors would lose more and more following. People wouldn't teach themselves how to read, those authors, those stories. It would just be the big guy at the top of the spacefaring bug-like shoot-'em-ups. After that, everybody else would be losing, and so at some point it does not become financially responsible to publish those novels. So they stop getting published. Everybody stops getting published except for that one writer. Saw this in horror for a while with Stephen King, right? The 80s were pretty good for horror literature. I would say the 90s and 2000s kind of ran dry. Maybe I'm just outside of the genre. But literary fiction has become all spacefaring bug-like alien shoot-'em-ups. What do I mean by that? Literary fiction, like I said, is the philosophy of life. But if all of the voices are screaming the same philosophy, there is no reason to read them all. All of literary fiction is disappointingly the same point of view. Worse than that, it is judgmentally the same point of view. Take classic William Faulkner, As I Lay Dying. That's the Bundrens, man. Pretty despicable family. Do you ever get the notion that William Faulkner, the author, is judging them? No. These people get to live their lives on the page, and we, the readers, have to assess how we feel about them. We are not given how to feel about them. It is not handed to us. We get the philosophy of William Faulkner in the day-to-day on the page as his characters take action. Now, it does not have to be pro something. We do not have to believe that William Faulkner was pro screw your family over to get dentures. No, we don't have to believe that. He's simply making a statement about selfishness, and we have to do the judging ourselves. At the beginning of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, we do not have to believe that James Joyce, the author, not even the speaker, the author, James Joyce, is pro moo cow. We just have to understand something is being said. It's not a judgment, it's a statement. Statements are all kind of judgments, but they're not. The statements in these books are not meant to be handed to you. Literary fiction these days is all meant to be handed to you. And everyone has the same philosophy. There's no reason to read this. There's no reason to read the literary fiction that is published today because it's all the same. Readers will gravitate towards fewer and fewer voices, and then there will be a renaissance in the older texts, which will be invisible itself to publishers because some of it is bought on Kindle. You're not publishing it, it's bought on Kindle. Some of it is free to download, it's public domain. You don't make any money on that, do you? That's this rant. That's all I really have for this Friday Reads. I will go over some of the stuff that I have been reading. Oh, and it's ironic. It's ironic for this discussion because it is literary fiction and it is all more than, 50 years old? Well, written more than 50 years ago. Shirley Jackson is wild. Absolutely mad woman. The Series 4, Let Me Tell You, on the channel has taken a turn for the absolute wildest series that I have been a part of. So many of those short stories. So I made the point today, I recorded a video for The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, and I said that I don't know if The Lottery is one of the best short stories of American letters, because I think best has a very unique and should have a very unique definition. Best should involve all of the elements of literature. I don't think some of those elements are quite present in Shirley Jackson, but I think that they are not present for a reason. I don't think a lot of her stories come full circle. I don't think a lot of her stories build symbolism inside the story the way, for example, Chrysanthemums does. I made that point. So maybe Shirley Jackson is not one of the best, quote-unquote, writers of English letters, but by God, if she isn't, one of the most interesting. A short story that I did a video for called It's Not the Money I Mind. That is the greatest character I have read in quite some time. The ideas inside The Lottery, Mr. Summers and Mr. Graves putting on their names, Mr. Summers, Mr. Graves, putting on a culling exercise in the middle of summer. Slipped that one by me at first. What is it called? The new I think it's called The New Maid. Yeah, The New Maid. I don't know what to make of that short story. I don't think it's gone public. I shot it. I don't think it's gone public yet. I think it goes public later this month. I don't know what to make of that story. French is the Mark of a Lady. Another one. Kind of at a loss, guys. So be prepared for those. But by God, they were interesting stories to read. And then Hemingway. A lot of Hemingway on the channel recently. Recently did a video for A Clean, Well-Lighted Place that will go up soon, in which I ask the question, is this a Nick Adams story? I'm not sure it isn't. I think there's a chance that A Clean, Well-Lighted Place is a Nick Adams story. I get into it in that video. Light of the World by Ernest Hemingway. I don't really remember much of that story the first, at least one time that I read it. It kind of reminds me of Kansas City. Because the place they're at, there's two punks making their way through the Midwest. I think it's set in Michigan. It was never really clear. Everyone in the town is angry all the time. And that kind of reminds me of Kansas City. But I think there's a point for it in the story. After the storm, I realized after making the video, after posting the video, I believe, there's a movie made of that short story from the 90s or early 2000s, After the Storm. Very interesting short story, very rough character. That's something we tend to get from Hemingway. Someone who is completely unperturbed by mass death and is only regretful that he didn't get his hands on the treasure. So anyways, that's what I have for this Friday Reads. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. We're over 2 years of consecutive daily uploads, and as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.